Welcome to this episode of Working Progress. My name's Brittany Helt. I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes. And today I'm really excited that our topic is going to be motivation in the workplace or motivation at work. We're really going to dive deep into exploring what drives us, what makes us want to get up in the morning and go to that job. And I'm even more excited about today's guest. So I'd love to welcome Lindsay Weigle. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brittany. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Joining us here in Arizona in the best time of the year. So thanks for making time for us in your very busy schedule.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Now, Lindsay, you are a mom. You are a speaker, a trainer, an author, and the managing partner at Bluewater Advisory. So
yes.
You have lots of titles, lots of roles.
I do.
Tell us a little bit, how did you come into this world and why do you care about motivation at work?
I love it so much. So I actually just celebrated my 10-year Bluewater anniversary, October 20th. So that was very exciting. I met my business partner, Mark Dubinsky, 10 and a half years ago. And when I learned a little bit about what he did, I said, I want to do what you do. And I sort of joined him on this journey 10 years ago. After 2 months after having my daughter, I joined the Bluewater team.
You like to do big things all at once.
Right, all at once.
Yeah.
And we also, we bought a house, like all those good things, all right in the same little cramped time frame. And so Mark and I were really joined at the hip for sort of the first year or two where I learned about the tools. We also have a part of our business that is, aside from succession and training and leadership development, we also do some retained searches.
Okay.
And so I started off on that side of the business, and there is no better way to get an understanding for what makes people tick and the assessments that TTI uses than to see them play out across candidates. Because you get a graph in front of you, you get a driving, a disc graph and a driving forces graph in front of you, and then you get to interact with this person, see that come to life. So we really spent the first 2 years beginning to understand how people worked, what made them tick, what answers they might likely give, what questions I needed to get good at asking. And so while I was on the search side, I was also working with Mark on the advisory side and have really just spent 10 years working hand in hand with our clients and with their team members. And my favorite part of our job is helping people to create environments that people want to go to work in.
That's huge right now too.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I feel like every time I pick up my phone or whatever I'm reading, right, it's talking about this disengagement and this concern around how do we keep folks wanting to come, wanting to contribute. So what are you seeing right now in that space?
I have some pretty big opinions about this.
Okay, great. Let's talk about it.
So I hear us use the word disengagement. And I think to me, what I am seeing is different engagement.
Interesting.
So I think historically, coming to work, having a job, and needing to pay your mortgage was enough for people to be motivated at work.
I mean, you got to do it, right?
Right. The it's my job, I have to was enough to keep people motivated. If they liked their job, if they trusted their boss, if they had good relationships with their coworkers, that was sort of icing on the cake. And so people were willing to work simply because they had to. And what I see now is that people want to be connected to the work they do. I don't think they're disengaged. I think they're disengaged from jobs they don't care about, that don't have purpose, that they don't feel like they're making a difference in. But when people feel like they can make a difference, when people feel connected to their work, to their team members, when there's high levels of trust, when they have good leadership, people are incredibly motivated to do what needs to be done. And so I don't think we're seeing disengagement. I think it requires more intentionality to connect people to their work than it used to. I think it's just different than it used to be.
I don't disagree at all. As you're sitting here talking, I'm going, why spend the majority of your time somewhere where you're not feeling like you're being fulfilled? Right. So how do we know? How do I, as an employee who's going to work, or maybe I'm sitting here listening to this conversation and I'm thinking about making a change. How do I understand what it is that I need to feel that fulfillment and to feel like, okay, I'm engaged and I'm connected to the purpose?
Right. I think it's one of those things that you innately feel. You either know you're connected to your work or you're not. You may not always be able to understand why, however. Like I know when I'm very connected to the work I'm doing, or I know when I'm feeling that friction of, what I always joke is that it's been 10 years since I've had Sunday scaries, which I am
That's
so
incredible.
grateful for.
That's incredible.
Love my job. And innately, I just look forward. And there are things I don't love to do within my job, of course.
Well, that's kind of life,
right?
Right.
Yeah. But I love the work that I get to do. And so I think there's an innate feeling that people have, but it's hard to often articulate what that is and where it comes from. And so we use driving forces in the work that we do. So DISC, I think, is a really great tool. And I think that when we're talking about the how we communicate, I think it's a really great tool and people love to understand it more deeply. But when we do driving forces work with people, that is where their eyes are just, wow, right? That I've never seen anything like this before. I've never been exposed to anything like this before. And it begins to help them articulate that innate feeling that either they are very connected to or not connected to their work and why that is. And so driving forces for me, we have a team member on our team, Brandon, who I will steal this from because it's such a great example. He talks about driving forces as the wind in your sailboat.
Oh,
so when you're working in
I've
alignment,
heard it explained that way.
Right. When you're working in alignment with your driving force, it's like the sail on your sailboat is full and the wind is pushing you along. And when you are working either out of alignment with your driving forces or in opposition of your driving forces, because either of those can be true, when you're working in opposition of your driving forces, that's when you have to do all the rowing. You're still doing the work, but you are working much harder to operate at the same level. And so when you understand your driving forces, it allows you to utilize the wind to carry you forward. It's really interesting. I had a woman that I was coaching and she worked for a smaller business and it was family run and she'd worked there for 22 years and she was such a valuable piece of that team and they were bought by a much, much larger global company.
Ooh, culture shift.
Right. Which very much changed the way in which she needed to work and operate within her role. And she was really struggling and she was a star employee for the 21 years she'd worked there. And all of a sudden she was really finding herself struggling and really questioning whether or not she should stay there. And so what we did, I've been coaching with her for a long time. And so what we did was, even though she's very familiar with driving forces and she knows all about it, we pulled out our driving forces again. And we said, let's look at how your job has shifted. And let's see if we can reframe the parts that feel out of alignment. We're not asking you to change your driving forces because that's never going to happen.
Sure.
Right? But what can we reframe your work in a way that falls in alignment with your driving forces? And when we did that, she was able to connect back to the wind in her sail and she was much happier within her role. So her role didn't change and neither did her driving forces. It was really just reframing how the work she was doing connected to the driving forces that already existed. And it made a huge difference in her happiness level within her role.
I'm sure. That's so powerful. And to think that we have the ability to just pay attention. Right? Pay attention to it. And that in itself can help us reconnect, right? It's all about that connection. I want to back up just a little bit because we just jumped right in.
I'm sorry.
No,
yes, I told you to get very excited about this topic.
I love it. But we're sitting here and we're using this term, driving forces.
Right.
So for the folks that maybe don't know who we are and what we do, driving forces is one of the sciences that we're able to measure using our tools and assessments. And it measures 6 different areas of motivation or it answers that why. Why do I get up in the morning? Can you give us a little more detail about, okay, so what? What is this driving force thing and why is it so powerful? Because personally, I think it's magical and I think it's maybe one of the most important and coolest aha kind of tools that we have in our toolkit.
So the reality is that our driving forces are the why we do what we do. They're when we feel connected and engaged to the work that we're doing, when we're happy, when it feels easy to do our work, when we get really excited about things. So And it doesn't even have to be about work. It's just like how we're wired in general, right?
Mhm.
So I'm a high resourceful is one of my driving forces. And when I do trainings on these, I always give examples. My favorite example is it really drives me crazy to have to fill up my kids' water bottles for school in the morning
Mhm.
because the dispenser on our refrigerator takes forever. And it's such a waste of time, right? I know I
Right.
need to do it,
Yep.
but it takes forever in the morning.
Mhm.
Well, one day I realized that if I took the silverware tray out of the dishwasher, I could unload the silverware while filling up water bottles. And I could do two things in one time. And Brittany, I texted pretty much everyone I know. It was the best day that I had because I was able to do this thing, right? This thing that felt like such a waste of time now no longer is because I'm doing multiple things at a time. I'm getting a bigger return on my time and investment in getting these water bottles filled up. And so it's not just about the work that we do. It's just the way that we see the world. It's the way that we operate within it. And so I mean, I really did text everyone I know about how excited I was that I had found something that felt like such a waste of time. And now it felt so much more effective than it was before. And so so when I'm at work, I'm trying to figure out what is the most effective, what is the most efficient way, how do I get the biggest return on my time, my energy, my effort, my dollars. And so that's the lens through which I'm going to look at everything that I do. I think driving forces are also really powerful because it helps us understand, well, we all know that we are different. Everyone's different from everyone else. I get that you're different than I am. But if I don't have context for how you're different than I am, it doesn't really help me know that we're that we're different. And driving forces gives us context for other people because I might look at you and think, and I might say, well, Brittany, it's the most effective way to do something. And that is a really effective way to convince you if you are also a high resourceful.
Sure.
If you are one of the other 11 driving forces,
I'm going to be like, so
not
what?
at all convincing.
Right.
But I look at you and I say, no, but it's the most effective way.
Mm-hmm.
And you look back at me and go, okay.
Duh.
There's
Right?
no wind in your sails, right?
Right.
If I've given
Yeah.
you a project and I say you should do it that way because it's the most effective, there is no wind in your sail whatsoever. But to me, I feel like I've been the most convincing I could have been. I told you exactly why you should do it. And then I look at you and think, why isn't she running with this? Then I think you don't care about your job, or maybe I think you're not motivated or you're not, engaged to make these things happen. When instead, if I can understand what your driving forces are, the things that you care about deeply, the things that fill your sail, and instead of talking to you about what I care about, I can talk to you about what you care about. Now, all of a sudden, I've tapped into your natural motivation. We talk a lot in training about people always ask, how do I motivate other people? How do I motivate my team members? Right. And my answer is always, you can't motivate someone else, but you can tap into their natural motivation. And so if I can instead talk to you about how effective it is or how much more efficient it's going to be, and I talk to the thing you care about, you can go, yes, I am in, and you are going to take the ball and you are going to run with it. And that's where I'm going to see your natural skills and talent come alive. And so that's the problem is we think we're helping to motivate people by talking about what we care about, when really we need to be able to understand what they care about. And driving forces gives us the framework to know what to look for.
Mm-hmm. So talk to us a little bit about what do we do if we don't have this magical tool? And I don't know that I also am highly resourceful. So when you're telling me that you're doing two things at once, my heart is exploding for you. Right. So for folks who might not have access to that, are there kind of like cues and clues to figure out what it is that makes you tick? And then how do we go about sharing that with people around us to help, get to know one another and really communicate effectively?
So those are two great questions. The first part is that we first have to recognize that what motivates us doesn't motivate everyone else. And I know that sounds really simple, but we have to recognize that our driving forces are more preferences than they are objectively the right way to handle things. And so being able to remove ourselves from the situation and say, okay, just because that's what I care about doesn't mean everyone else needs to care about it. Being able to remove those blinders from ourselves is the most important part, because if I'm not willing to do that, nothing else really matters.
Right.
The second part is being able to understand, where are people really excited and where are they really frustrated? People will always answer in their driving forces to you. So if you ask me, why am I really, if you say, Lindsay, you feel, I sense that you're really frustrated in this project and this seems to really be a struggle for you. Talk to me about why. I'm going to give you an answer that's most likely because it's taking me forever. It doesn't feel effective. I'm going to answer in my driving force without even knowing that that's what my driving forces are. And so when you ask good questions, why are you so excited? Why are you so frustrated? And then you genuinely listen to the answer, listen more deeply. It's not she doesn't like this spreadsheet. It's because it feels ineffective, or it feels as though there are better tools for you. If I can listen more deeply, I can understand what makes that person tick. And so the next time I talk to them, my job is to sort of float that past them and see if that's something that's connecting with them or resonating with them. If I'm sensing that maybe they're frustrated by the ineffectiveness, and I say, when we tackle this project, the goal is to make this process as effective as possible. And I see someone go, oh yes, I'm in, right? Like I notice their body language. I notice their posture. I think that is what motivates them.
Right.
That's what connects them. And so being able to ask better questions and then pay attention to the answer is really where you get that understanding from.
Well, and I'm hearing you're not saying it, but you're saying it. Look for patterns. Right. In those responses with those folks as you're having those conversations.
100%.
So aside from why questions, what are some other questions we can ask to kind of get those clues and cues from folks?
So questions like, tell me your favorite part of your job. Tell me the parts of your job that frustrate you the most. Tell me about when you're working on this project. What is it about it that excites you so much? Tell me about if you could design your very best day, what would that look like? So starting to pick up on those, because people will speak to you through their driving forces, even if they don't recognize that they are. And so you being able to hear those and sometimes, here's the thing. I think when we talk sometimes about assessments or about these tools or about the ability to understand people think about having the number of conversations they have a day. They think about the number of emails they send. How am I ever going to spend? I'm already, at max capacity. How am I ever going to have that much intentionality in conversations with every one of my employees, my boss, my coworkers? The reality is you have to start with maybe it's the one person you have the most friction with. If there's one person on my team that maybe she and I don't see eye to eye, or he and I are struggling to connect, pick that person to ask better questions of. Pick that person. Maybe I even have a little journal where I write down, they were really fired up about this thing today. They seemed really excited about this thing today. Here's some feedback I got from them about what they love about their job. And so I look for that pattern within that one particular person. And so start as a high resourceful, start in the space where it's going to make the biggest impact, right? Is where is that friction and frustration? And so how do I take that person and apply that skill set to this particular individual? And then once I figure that person out, then another and another and another.
Well, and to think about the ripple effect that can have, or the impact that can have on your day. If it's that one person that you're like, oh, I gotta go figure this person out,
Right.
Flipping that, having a different kind of relationship or a different kind of interaction with that person just once in a day can really change the way that the rest of the day follows.
And I think it all stems from leading with curiosity. Is being curious about that person. I think it's really easy for us to put people in the bad box, to see the way they behave, to see the way they make decisions, to see sort of why they've chosen to do what they've chosen to do, and to think, well, I wouldn't do it that way. And so I sort of put them in the bad box, or I don't trust them to make good decisions. And instead, if I can get curious about why they're making that decision, if I can lean into, I always use a phrase with my coaching clients is, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. Because it's not saying you're right. It's not agreeing with them. It's not saying we're going to do it your way. A phrase like, that's really interesting. Tell me more about it, is a neutral way to gather more information without being challenging. So you're getting a more realistic answer from how they see things. It's building trust, which is so important in that ability to motivate individuals. And it really opens up those lines of communication differently when we are leading with curiosity than when we are leading with trying to get our point across.
Sure. What a powerful way to change the vibe or the atmosphere in a conversation, a room, a team, an organization. It seems so simple.
It's simple, but it's not easy.
Right?
The ability, we are all so busy. We have so much on our plates. We have multiple lines of input coming at us all the time. And to be in a space to operate as the best version of ourselves, who is a person who's curious, who is asking intentional questions and then paying attention to the answers. That is not easy. It is simple, but it is not easy to actually accomplish. And so taking good care of ourselves as leaders and being able to regulate ourselves is really crucial. We do a lot of training on dynamic conversations, and we talk about how our job as a communicator is to create an environment to show up as the best version of ourselves, and to create an environment where the other person can show up as the best version of themselves. And so when you create that environment and you ask those questions, you're ultimately going to get to what really makes your team members tick. And then when you can translate, instead of what you care about, but what they care about, that's when you get all the motivation you need from your team members.
So going back to kind of the organization level, or going back to that team level, we've talked a lot about me and you and one-on-one communication. Right. So is that really where it all stems from? Or how do we kind of take that to that bigger level, the team level, the department level, the organization level? Because I think a lot of the talk track right now around organizations is around their culture. And to me, motivation and understanding the motivation of the people who are coming in and working with you every day, that's a huge part of the culture. Right. So how do we level that up from the you and I and the one-on-one conversations and interactions to a bigger, more robust, kind of experience? Right.
So I think a lot of it has to do at the very beginning, when you're hiring individuals, having a clear sense of what makes your organization tick as a whole. And we certainly want diversity in our DISC and our driving forces, right? We want diversity in all those things, but to have an understanding of where you sit as an organization and ensuring that there's discussion of those things, to get a sense of what does make this person tick within their interviews, to be able to give your team members the language to be able to ask those really good questions to their team members, to bring these things up in team one meetings, if you will, to use some 5 dysfunctions of a team language, but to be able to continue to develop that language across your organization is really where you get the breadth of the impact.
Very cool. And I think also understanding as an organization, and correct me if you feel differently, but I think if you understand as an organization what's important to the organization, and being able to articulate that to others, and then going all the way back to your coaching story, if you can help people connect the dots for how they fit into that, to me, that seems like a pretty good starting point.
Absolutely. You'd be amazed how many times I actually had a coaching call on the way here on my drive to the airport. And there's a gentleman who's feeling very frustrated with his job right now. And that was the big conversation. I said, next coaching session, we're going to pull out your driving forces and let's figure out how we reframe the work you're doing, because his role has shifted significantly, what he wants to do versus what the organization is now asking him to do. And so he doesn't want to leave, but he doesn't want to be this frustrated any longer either. And so we're going to use the driving forces assessment to reframe, see where there's connectedness that he isn't seeing right now, to hopefully reduce that level of frustration and increase his level of motivation.
That's hopeful for people, right? Because I think that the one thing that we know is constant is change. Right. And in the current environment and the working world, I think change is happening at a much faster speed than it's probably ever happened before. So just understanding that there's hope there, right? We can go look at things and we can reframe them. And it doesn't mean that you have to just bail. On your role or your responsibilities.
And that we're only going to see that change faster and faster. And so the better we can get at understanding how to reconnect back to those things, the happier we will stay in our roles and the more naturally motivated we are. And we say at Bluewater, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So when you are operating in that better space, it is also bringing everybody up in that space as well. And so the ability for us to show up as leaders, to have those good conversations, to ask those good questions, and to challenge each other really ensures that we get that big organizational lift.
That's so delightful. I think that when we talk about culture and motivation, so often we hear all the negative pieces and parts of it. So it's so nice to kind of remember that it can be just as simple as a conversation.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Lindsay, time is flying.
I know.
And we're kind of ticking down here. So let's wrap this up a little bit. If you can I realize this question is a little bit impossible.
Okay,
but
fair enough.
If you could choose one thing, just one thing that you want our listeners and our viewers to walk away with, when you think about motivation at work and you think about, what's the thing that drives me to get up in the morning and go do my best and show up in the world. What's the one thing you would like people to remember about this conversation or to take with them into the world today?
So I think for me, it's about that we as individuals have to do the work. So I have this thing I do called First Friday every month, which is basically where I'm looking at how am I working in alignment with the kind of person I want to be, with the kind of work I want to do, with what's working in my life and what's not. And for me, the ability to take a pause once a month and say what's working and what's not. I think what happens is a lot of times we sort of sit in the what's not working because it's working okay enough.
Sure.
And so we sit in it for long enough that the pendulum swings until we hit a point where we can no longer handle it. And then we sort of have this explosion or frustration, and then we swing the pendulum back the other way. And so it's this constant sort of state operating between these two. And what I found is by doing a check-in with myself once a month, what is working? Where am I frustrated? Where am I engaged? Where am I really happy? Where am I annoyed? It allows me to never move that far from the center. I can sort of just move a little in the line that I need to so that I am continually staying engaged as opposed to waiting until I have this giant swing one direction or the other. And so I think it comes down to us doing the work of what do I love about my job? How can I reframe this to be something that either is absolutely the right fit for me where I can be happier, or that I need to move on to something else that is a better fit, right? Because sometimes we can't reframe it enough. Sometimes it is the wrong fit. But when we're in that space, it's better to move on than it is to stay frustrated in the job. But we have to be able to move for the right reasons and to be able to have an understanding of ourselves first. So doing the work for ourselves, what's working and what's not, I think is the foundation for everything else moving forward.
That's so powerful. So First Fridays.
First Friday.
First Fridays, everybody's going to take some time to pause. And
even if it's a half an hour.
themselves.
I already have First Fridays on my calendar from now until the end of 2025 because they are so crucial in my world. But even a half an hour, I look at personal, professional, and wellness. What is working in all three of those areas? And I've been doing it for 2.5 years, and it's made all of the difference in the world.
That's an incredible tip. I hope I'm going to steal that.
Good.
And I hope
we'll
others
will.
share. Yes, I hope others will as well.
Awesome.
So Lindsay, if people are sitting here going, man, that was a great conversation. I want to learn more. I want to talk to Lindsay. How do people find you?
Yes. So we are Bluewater Advisory. We're located in Maryland, but we work all over the country as I'm here in Arizona today doing a whole bunch of work while I'm here in town. So our website is bluewateradvisory.com. And we love working with organizations. We love working with owners and leaders within organizations to help them create cultures that people want to work at, where they feel valuable and where they bring their best selves to work.
Awesome. And you can find you on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn
too.
as well.
You have a pretty good presence there.
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn as well. Yes.
And we can see what you're doing on those First Fridays.
Absolutely. I always post my First Fridays. I sure do.
Awesome.
Sure do.
Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for taking time and chatting with us.
Thank you, Brittany. It's my pleasure.
Really appreciate it. All right. That's another wrap on Working Progress Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.